The Walking Dead ended years ago, except it didn't. Because somehow, even after 11 seasons, multiple finales, countless character exits, and an entire universe of spin-offs, this franchise still feels unfinished. And honestly, that's becoming the problem. Not because there's nothing good left in the Walking Dead universe. There absolutely is. Some of these spin-offs have genuinely strong moments. Daryl Dixon especially had a really first strong season. The Ones Who Live brought genuine excitement back to the franchise with Rick's return. And even Dead City had an interesting premise. But the issue now isn't quality alone, it's direction, because the franchise no longer feels like one story progressing towards an ending. It feels like a universe that keeps expanding outward without actually moving forward. And at some point, The Walking Dead needs to stop expanding and finally wrap itself up, because right now the franchise feels trapped between ending and continuing. And the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to make any of this feel meaningful again. What made early Walking Dead work so well was that it constantly felt like movement, not just physically but narratively. The characters were always evolving, communities were changing, the world was opening up, and every season felt like another step in the journey towards rebuilding civilization. Even when the show slowed down, it felt like it was progressing towards something larger. That's what made the early seasons so compelling. It wasn't just about zombies, it was about the question underlying everything. What does the world become after the collapse? And for a long time, the show actually explored that really well. But somewhere along the line, the franchise stopped feeling like a story and started feeling like a network of content. And that's where the problem begins. Because instead of uniting towards inclusion, everything started splitting apart. The show was almost perfect from seasons 1 till 6. They had their issues in 7 and 8, but they were still solid in my opinion. And really, they could have just ended there and it would have been a pretty decent ending. But they kept going. And when Rick left, it felt like a completely different show. And in season 11, it didn't feel like a real ending because they teased different spin-offs, different locations, different timings, different side stories. And while that initially sounded exciting, it's now created a strange feeling where everything feels disconnected from the actual endpoint. Take Daryl Dixon for example. The Daryl Dixon spin-off generally worked at first because it felt fresh. The atmosphere was different, the setting was interesting, and normal readers can absolutely still carry this franchise. But now, the further it goes on, the more one question starts to dominate everything else. When are we actually getting this reunion of Rick? Because that's what people are emotionally invested in, not endless detours or another season of separation. The emotional endpoint of this franchise has been sitting there for years now, and the longer the show delays it, the more stretched everything starts to feel. And it's not just Daryl Dixon either. Dead City is starting to run an exact same issue. The Maggie and Negan dynamic worked because it was emotionally unresolved. That tension carried the show initially, but the longer these spin-offs continue, the more they feel like extensions of progression. And that's the key difference. Expansion is not the same thing as progression. The Walking Dead universe keeps getting bigger, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's getting closer to an ending. And honestly, the biggest missed opportunity might be the CRM storyline. For years, the CRM was built up as this huge mysterious force, the closest thing the franchise had to an actual endgame. It felt like a natural evolution of the world, a large-scale surviving power that could finally push the story beyond scattered communities and survival camps. And then, The Ones Who Live kind of just removed them, which is strange because the CRM would have been a perfect foundation for a true final chapter. Instead, it feels like one of the franchise's biggest remaining long-term storylines was resolved too quickly without fully exploring the wider consequences. And now, the universe feels even more fragmented than before, because what exactly is the larger direction anymore? That's the question I keep coming back to. What is all this building towards? Because right now it doesn't feel like the franchise knows. And that's why I honestly think the smartest thing AMC could do is stop creating more extensions and finally create a real conclusion. Not another spin-off, not another disconnected side story, an actual final season, a true season 12. And honestly, it wouldn't even need to be massive. You wouldn't need years of build-up. You could genuinely do it in around 8 episodes if the writing was strong enough, because the emotional pieces are already there. Rick, Daryl, Morgan, Negan, Maggie. These characters are the emotional backbone of the universe. And instead of keeping them separated across multiple spin-offs, bring them together one final time. Because that's what the franchise is missing right now. Convergence. Everything coming together. Everything keeps expanding outward, but nothing is coming back together. And stories need convergence to feel complete. They need closure. That's why the Walking Dead universe currently feels exhausting to some point, rather than exciting. Not because people hate it, but because it feels endless. An endless story is dangerous because eventually tension disappears. You stop feeling momentum. You stop feeling progression. And instead of asking what happens next, people start asking, is this ever actually going to end? That's a bad place for a story to be, especially one that used to understand progression so well. And honestly, I still care about this franchise. A lot of people do. That's why this conversation even matters, because there's something here still worth saving. The Walking Dead still has some incredible characters, some genuinely emotional relationships, some iconic moments that defined television for years. But it desperately needs direction again. And more importantly, it needs finality. Because the best endings don't happen when the stories continue forever. They happen when stories understand the right moment to conclude. Look at some of the greatest television endings ever: Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, 6 Feet Under. What made those endings powerful wasn't endless expansion. It was convergence. Everything coming together emotionally and narratively. That's what The Walking Dead needs now. Not more fragmentation, not another 3 spin-offs, an ending, a real one. Because if this franchise keeps stretching itself outward without moving toward a conclusion, eventually, even the emotional moments are going to lose impact. And I don't think anyone wants that. The Walking Dead doesn't need another extension. It needs closure. And honestly, a final 8 episodes season 12, bringing every major storyline together, might be the best chance this universe has to finally end the way it deserves to.